Welcome to Disrupting Japan, straight talk from Japan's most successful entrepreneurs. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for joining me. I surprised a lot of my friends and fans last year when I joined TEPCO, Japan's largest electric utility. I admit, at first glance, it seems a pretty radical departure from my history in startups, and in most ways, it is. However, there is a transformation going on right now in energy all over the world. And while there's been very little disruption in the energy markets over the past 70 years, 10 years from now, the markets will look nothing like they do today. Well, today, we sit down with Yohei Kiguchi, CEO of Enechange, one of the more innovative startups building a business in the new energy markets. Now, before you understand what Enechange does, I need to give you a little bit of background on how energy deregulation is working around the world. And the story of the coming disruption is quite similar in all developed nations. Since the days of, Thomas Edison, really, the power company was responsible for creating the electricity, building and maintaining the power grids to transmit that electricity across the country, and then billing the customers for the electricity they used. Because of the cost involved and the importance of universal and reliable electricity, it made sense for this to be done by a single, tightly regulated monopoly. And that's how things stayed for about 100 years. But over the past decade, around the world, the costs of generating electricity have dropped, and we've seen smaller, more affordable plants and a proliferation of solar. On the retail side, smart meters and the internet has made it easier to collect data and to bill customers. And so, markets around the world are being deregulated, with power generation, power transmission, and retail billing all being handled by separate companies. While power generation gets most of the press, most of the market disruption has focused on the retail side, with hundreds of companies entering the market and many offering steep discounts. Around the world, electricity consumers have never had this much choice. And that's where Enechange comes in. Enechange is by far Japan's largest energy switching website. It provides tools that allow consumers and businesses to shop for the best or the cheapest energy supplier. But as Yohei explains, the cheapest is not usually the best. And Yohei also has some interesting observations on why Japan is a better place to start a startup than Europe. But Yohei tells that story much better than I can. So let's get right to the interview. So I'm sitting here with Yohei Kiguchi of Enechange, an energy price comparison site. So thanks for sitting down with me.
Yeah, thanks for having a time with me and Tim.
What I find really interesting about Enechange is you started this business in 2015, and that was even before the retail markets were deregulated, which happened in April 2016. What attracted you to the business?
We set up the company exactly 1 year before the market deregulation. Just 1 year to prepare for the market deregulation. So that's why we just intentionally set up the company in April 15.
That makes sense, but investors typically don't like to make big bets on unknown companies and unknown founders and markets that don't exist yet. So what attracted you to the whole idea, and how did you get the investors on board with this?
Basically 2 points. So one is the energy deregulation is happening all over the world. The UK is back to 2002, where I was living there. All the European countries, due to the EU treaty, so 2008 or 2009, all the EU nations need to be deregulated energy market. Every country, when the market was deregulated, similar company, similar energy switching company, kind of emerging. This business model, which was not happening in Japan yet, but it was basically set to happen anyway.
Yeah, so you could point to the success in foreign markets and say, this is how it happened overseas, so of course it's going to work the same way in Japan.
Yeah.
Excellent. Tell me about your customers. So how many people visit your site every month? How many people are really interested in changing energy retailers?
So let me give you like the big picture first. So basically like 70 million customers, registered customers in Japan, and which is basically like the half of the total energy consumption in Japan. Okay, the other half is commercial customers.
Oh, so half residential, half commercial.
The half residential, half commercial, yeah. For the residential sector is like 70 million. And then the industrial sector is roughly 1 million customers.
And of those 70 million, how many are coming to your website every month?
Our site average monthly visitor is like 2 million.
That's really high. For a potential market of 70 million, if you have 2 million users visiting your site every month, that's fantastic penetration.
Yeah, then like as a country overall, like there's over 10 million energy switch has already happened since the market deregulation. You know, we are the number one company in the switching market. So the number does make sense.
What is your business model exactly? Do you sell leads to companies? Do you get a commission when customers switch? How do you guys make money?
Pretty much like every single like an energy comparison website in the world is having like same business model, basically like free for the customer, and then you get a commissions from the new suppliers who acquire the customer.
Okay. So if 10 million people out of a potential market of 70 million have already switched in the last year and a half,
yeah,
that's a pretty active market.
Yeah.
Are people mostly switching based on price?
Yes. Like we were dreaming like people want to choose a greener company or cleaner companies or like a more local regional company. But actually at the end of the day, like 95% of customers saying like it's just cheaper.
Just price.
Yeah. And then that's the same like on the UK, like UK got the same statistics, like 90%, like it's just cheaper.
I think it's an interesting market right now in that energy is a commodity. And it's been interesting watching how people have tried to differentiate. And so you see a lot of advertising that's focused on, like you mentioned, green and community supply. But looking at how people switch, that's not important to them?
But actually not that true. I'm saying like, the cheaper. I'm not saying cheapest.
Oh, okay. So consumers need a lower price to switch, but they're not looking for the absolute lowest.
Yes, true, yeah.
Huh.
So when the market became open like 1.5 years ago, it used to be only 10 companies who were supplying electricity in Japan, but it's now like 400 companies register themselves to be energy retailer. So like the market itself is just suddenly getting really crowded. But now it's kind of shrinking down as well. Merger and acquisition is happening right now. So now only 30 to 50, probably the maximum 100 active player right now.
How many companies are listed on your site?
70.
And how do you choose which 70? Because on paper, there's 400-ish companies in Japan in this market.
So the one is need to agree with our commission model. And the secondly, like we also interview the companies to see the quality of the company. And if the company doesn't have any kind of experience or like got a good criteria to be an energy supplier, we actually don't put them on.
I want to get back and dive deeper into the market a little later on. Yeah. But right now I want to talk a little bit about you. Because you're involved in a number of different companies. So you also run SMAP, Smart Meter Analytics Platform. And both companies were spun out of an organization called Cambridge Energy Data Lab.
Yep.
Can you tell us a bit about those two organizations?
I'm actually still living in the UK. My main home is actually in London, and I'm paying tax for the UK pretty much. I went to the UK back 2012 as a Cambridge student, and then I started a master's degree and then carry on to the PhD in the energy technologies in Cambridge University. I was examining smart meter data analytics, so I'm kind of part of the computer science society. So I decided to set up a company. It's called the Cambridge Energy Data Lab. That was in 2013. And that was slightly too early to set up the company for energy deregulations or Enechange business.
So that first company, the Cambridge Energy Data Labs, was that with some of your fellow students, or what was the purpose of that company?
So actually before my PhD and the Cambridge careers, I was running a company in Japan. I started a company in 21, ran the company for 3 years, and then managed to sell it. So I have a little bit of experience of the entrepreneur, and then having some little bit cash as well. I inject most of the money, but some investor willing to collaborate with me. So I set up a company, the Chemistry Energy Day Lab. And then we actually try out a bunch of different ideas. And only 2 out of 10 was going well. Okay. Then so 8 failed basically. But one happened to be focusing on the energy market in Japan. And one is smart meter data analysis, which seems to be kind of global business. Then for the Enechange side, energy switching side in Japan is done by Japanese team. Whilst the smart meter science part is done by the Cambridge friends.
Other than the fact they're in the same industry, they don't really have a lot to do with each other.
It's true, yeah.
Silicon Valley investors have a reputation that's pretty much deserved, that they're not interested in investing in anything outside of Silicon Valley. But Enechange's investors are primarily Japanese. Did it help you or hurt you with Japanese investors that your team was based in the UK and that had such strong ties to the UK?
Yeah, so that was just impossible to manage Enechange's business from the UK. No Japanese investor willing to invest in the UK company. That was already obvious. Our client will be typical all the traditional Japanese company. Naturally, very slow. If we saying we are the UK company, it's gonna another 2 years to get started the project with them. Yeah, that's how we started the company.
All right. And so you're the only member of the management team that's flying back and forth every 2 weeks. Everyone else is here in Japan full time.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the market here in Japan. Enechange is a web-based company, but you guys started using television ads pretty early on. Japanese startups in general, not just Enechange, tend to go with television ads very early. If it's a $10 million round, a big chunk of that money will be spent on TV ads.
Yeah. That's actually pretty much most of the main objective to raise money for that. So yeah.
So why is TV advertising so important in Japan?
I mean, that was kind of big trend last few years. For the smaller early stage of startup tends to raise 5 million, 10 million, injecting half of the raised money into the TV commercials and then see what's gonna happen. In Japan, there's kind of many good case studies right now. So that's why we actually try to do that. So,
is it a matter of credibility or is it simply a matter of reach? You're reaching a bigger audience.
I think it's a both way. Probably reaching the customer, more installation, more installs of apps. It should come first, yeah. And the secondary kind of credibility.
How soon after launch did you guys start doing TV ads?
So we started TV commercial this spring, or just 1 year after market deregulation.
Okay. So basically, as soon as you had the money to do it.
Yeah, pretty much soon. Yeah, true, yeah.
You mentioned before that the market is pretty much split 50-50 between commercial and residential users. These are very different markets in terms of how you reach the customers and what their buying decisions are. Did you have a different go-to-market for retail and commercial? Or?
Yeah, absolutely true. Yeah. So actually, our revenue size is roughly 50-50.
So just in line with the market, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, slightly industrial customer is actually larger than the residential sector, to be honest. The residential customers is we 100% done on the website.
And I noticed, but on the commercial side, you have consultants and salesmen that do direct outreach.
Yeah, it's true. So for the industrial commercial side, it's more energy consultant. They basically send us inquiries or they do
So inbound sales.
Yeah, it's just inbound sales. Kind of example customers, let's say kind of huge factories or the buildings or hospitals, something. They can't really switch energy companies just on the website. They both will differently ask the manager are they reliable? We operating a hospital. What happened if that blackout gonna happen? If you switch energy company or something.
Well, yeah, and also the way they use energy might be completely different. Yeah. They might be operating at night to try to get cheaper rates, or their use profile will be unique.
Yeah, true. Commercial sector is much more heterogeneous. We basically analyze the consumption by accessing smart meter data. Then we consult the better or cheapest energy company.
Is your commission based on the customer's energy use over the past 3 months or the next 3 months, or how is it calculated?
Yeah, so it's pretty much tied with annual electricity consumption.
Well, that makes sense. So if you're switching over a factory, it's worth putting 1 or 2 people on there and optimizing exactly what they're going to do.
Yeah, it's literally last week we got like one of the largest clients. That was equivalent to like 100,000 households. So that's like very, very important. Like one guy literally like spent this last 3 months just for this company.
But I can see why Enechange is really attractive for them, because you take the same commission from everyone. Yep. And so you've got no mixed incentives. Your incentive is really to help them out and find them the right one.
So that was actually like a good point. Like there was some discussion in the UK side. Switching website commission varies. That's kind of untransparency or like commissions. Basically, like when we kind of landed in Japan, we got already like learned from the UK experience. We set the commission criteria saying like, we try to be uniform as much as we can. And basically this is our commissions. In theory, which is not going to be too high for energy companies. They should be able to afford it.
Well, it's as long as you keep your commissions lower than the average cost of customer acquisition, everyone will love you and keep signing up.
Yeah, so that's why we got a 70 company right now.
Yeah, and looking at the website, you've got all the energy companies that I know about anyway.
Yeah, so that's why like we can get trust from both sides, from the energy companies, like they can trust me, and then at the same time, like consumer can trust me because we know like get kind of any bribery deal.
Yeah, I mean, and in the end, that trust is your entire brand on both sides. Yeah. If anyone thinks that one company's getting an advantage over another, either on the customer side or the supplier side, then it all falls apart.
Yeah.
Thinking 5-10 years into the future, are you thinking about expanding into things like comparison sites for mobile phones or similarly complex services?
The short answer is actually no. I'm just energy geek, and I'm not literally like no interest in like a smartphone or like SIM card or like
So do what you know.
Yeah, do what I know, and actually, but like my expertise basically is like smart meter data or like big data. So I'm more like kind of excited and like looking forward to energy industries like as you mentioned like the smart meter or like kind of EVs, virtual power plant, like many other massive opportunities down the line of the energy industrial revolutions. It's gonna happen like in the next 10 years.
I agree. I mean, I think we were talking about this before, and I think that today the energy industry looks a lot like it did 50 years ago.
Yep.
But 10 years from now, it's going to look nothing like it does today.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. Like, obviously, we are not the first price switching website in Japan. So there's like a huge one called Kakaku.
Right.
And then we are the first energy switching website, but like price comparison website, kind of expanding into the energy price comparison, obviously.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you specifically about Kakaku. So do you view them as a major competitor? Or do you think that their focus on price exclusively puts them at a bit of a disadvantage to you?
Yeah. That was officially announced deal for the industrial customers. We officially partnership with Kakaku.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right.
So they are basically under the branch, like under the umbrella of Enechange network.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah. So it means like we actually dominating the market for the industrial customers, and then the legislation sectors we are technically competing with each other, and then that's fine. Like it's fair to have two price comparison website in the $100 billion industry. So
there's room, but still,
we actually looking at like this business as a just entrance of the huge energy industrial revolution. So we actually like been providing much deeper solution for energy companies. Helping them to acquire the customers. We help them to manage the customers or like analyze the customer with the smart meter data or blah, blah, blah. We're actually doing a much deeper solution.
So what kind of analysis do you want to provide them? What is the information you think they don't have that you want to give to them?
I mean, actually, the short answer is actually profitability. And before the deregulation of the energy market, energy company never look into the individual profitability. So they don't know how much earning from this particular customer, or even they don't know like they're losing money from this customer.
Right. Well, before it didn't matter anyway because they had to provide.
Yeah. But like now the market was deregulated. The energy company is like forced to compete. As a normal like a public company, they start looking at the profitability of their business. To do so, like they need to analyze the data.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that energy retail companies or energy companies in general, up until now, and I think internally in most of these companies, they view the government regulators as their customer. Because for the last 100 years, the energy companies have gone to the government and say, we want to do this. We want to raise our rates. We want to build these power lines. We want to put up this power plant. And if the government said yes, they could do it. If the government said no, they couldn't. So I think the idea of the retail customer as a customer is a pretty new one to the industry.
Yeah, true, yeah.
Well, have you found that Japanese energy companies have made that shift? Are they looking at their customers as actual customers? Do they want to know more about them?
Yeah, pretty much like large companies, like let's say top 10, top 20 company, they're rushing to adapt to like new technologies right now. And the older company are pretty much like, my client actually. So we actually monopolizing like all the like kind of customers analysis part in Japan. Yeah, so they are aware of that.
Let's talk about Japan and the market here as a whole. You're mining the data. You're seeing why people are switching and how. So 5-10 years from now, we won't have 400 retailers. We're going to be down to, I don't know what the number will be, but it'll be less. So who wins? Is it going to be the low-cost providers? Is it going to be the established utilities?
Probably the short answer is like the company who can adapt to the new technology trend. Japan has the largest active smart meter on the planet, or nearly 40 million smart meter sending a half-hourly data to the server. And whereas like in the UK, they actually like installed like 10 million smart meter, but they're actually not active. Right. So they're actually storing the data on the meter, but they're not sending the data like half-hourly.
Yeah, and actually Japan's system, the data quality is really high and the consistency is much higher than in most other countries.
Yeah, exactly.
Most people looking at this market will say it's going to be price-driven, so low cost will win, or it's reliability-driven, so the big brands will win. But what you're saying is there's going to be new technology and new uses in the market, and so differentiators will win.
No, I think like kind of high efficient company can win basically by analyzing the data. Yeah, operational efficiency. As you know, like the regional energy company is having like 50 years legacy, and then like they are naturally and then very, very slow, and they're actually very, very reluctant to adapt. And also at the same time, other kind of giant company who enter the energy market are also very huge organization. So like gas companies or like telecom companies, they're very slow as well. But like this industry is like just a purely kind of financial business. Energy business is just all about data.
It has been interesting to watch what's happened in like Texas and Europe and the markets that deregulated early. Because the really deep discounters all went out of business.
Yeah.
They couldn't sustain those margins. So yeah, it makes sense, operational efficiency. So
basically, it's not like a telecom business. Telecom business is still like kind of gross profit margin is still really high. So they can dump the price to acquire the customers. But like energy industry is like usually like their gross profit is less than 10%.
Well, Yohei, I'm gonna challenge you on that. So I think it might well work out that way. But what if it evolves more like the mobile phone industry, which in a sense it's kind of similar. They're selling a commodity that reliability is important, cost is important, but not like the most important thing. But mobile phones, both in Japan and the US, the market's evolved not so that they're competing on price, but they've created bundles and options that are so hard to understand, consumers can't tell what they're paying, basically. Do you think there's a chance the energy markets will move in that direction?
That can be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, SoftBank and AU both have been some of the most active new players in this market.
Yeah, so that's absolutely true. So the major difference between like the telecom industry and energy industry is the telecom industry is, I think, still the positive sum game. Still like an IoT is coming, like, that everything will be connected to the internet. Like, that even like in the refrigerator will have the like SIM card in the near future. So like the number of the connections still increasing like yearly basis. Whilst like electricity consumption is pretty much zero sum games. Yeah. Like there's some like kind of increasing momentum, which is like an electric vehicle or something like that. But still like it's not like telecom industry's expansion.
Yeah, I mean actually if you leave electric vehicles out of it electricity consumption's been going down
Yeah.
in both Japan and the United States because of energy efficiency measures.
So industrial actually sector is still growing because of like automation. But like residential sector is like LED lights and blah, blah, like even we have like new iPhones, like TVs, but like just getting very efficient and like just especially residential sector, electricity consumption going down. So it means like the market itself is basically pretty much steady. So in this kind of market, expansion strategy, it doesn't sustain all the time.
That's true. It is.
Stay.
It's all market share, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's true both on the retail side and the generation side. Actually, that brings it after the Fukushima disaster and they shuttled the nuclear power stations down. Japan's been relying a lot more on natural gas.
Yeah.
How do you think this is going to play out? I mean, the current consensus is very much against turning those nuclear power plants back on. But burning natural gas, it's, terrible for the environment, for global warming, and it's terrible for Japan's balance of trade because all that gas is imported. Do you think we're going to see those nuclear plants turn back on?
I personally very against the nuclear power station. Like, kind of good point as you mentioned, like, good for the kind of balance of trade, which is kind of crucial point for like as a country. So that's absolutely makes sense. But at the same time, like, that's disaster still, and then like which is like against the global trend. No countries in the developed countries like in a building or like restarting like nuclear power station right now, apart from the UK.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
There's not a lot of new nuclear capacity being added. So do you think Japan is going to just decommission those plants early?
As you know, like no one knows how to decommission like the nuclear power station. So like
that's another problem.
Yeah, that's another problem. Like ideas like being like the first guy to in charge of like a decommission like nuclear power station is gotta be absolutely a headache.
Yeah, but Japan right now seems to be kind of stuck in this middle ground where there's a lot of plants that are not operating. They cannot get permission to run again, but they aren't going through the decommissioning process either. They're just sort of kept in this limbo state. Yeah. And that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, that's not good for anybody. Like you just see wasting like $1 billion like for the maintenance. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of politics tied up in that as well, so we'll see. Well, listen, before we wrap up, I want to ask you what I call my magic wand question. Okay. And that is, if I gave you a magic wand and I told you you could change one thing about Japan, anything at all, the education system, the legal system, the way people think about risk, anything at all to make things better for startups in Japan, what would you change?
As an entrepreneur, like living in London, so I feel like Tokyo is much easier, better place than London, in many ways.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Like how?
It actually depends on the industry, I guess. But like let's say like energy industry, like if the listener here is like a kind of global audience, now I'm very very encouraging them to come to Japan or like collaborate with Japanese company because like let's say like kind of Facebook like business, there's no like local regional market, like there's like only single global market, which like global market and China market.
Yeah, that's right,
pretty much, right? Yeah. So pretty much like as long as like the market is like global market, like people can do from wherever. There can be some like local players at early stage. So that's why like you want to make a great $1 billion company, like pretty much like go to Silicon Valley in generally speaking. But the UK is kind of struggling, like, because whenever like in a UK company start like in a business, it just easily kind of conquered by the American company. So like some of the part of business like energy, there's no global business.
Right.
The regional business everywhere, the highly fragmented business. In this fragmentation, Japan is the largest deregulated energy market in the world.
But what about, that makes sense in terms of the energy markets in Japan are much bigger. But doing business day to day, making sales to Japanese utilities versus UK utilities versus Texas utilities, is it pretty much the same process?
I feel like it's literally same. Like like I've been struggling to negotiate like with TEPCO and TEPCO, but I'm also struggling to do with like British Gas and EDF. The same dinosaur, like it's the same.
Utilities are going to be pretty conservative.
But actually, another kind of important part is the IPO. So my company, Enechange, is trying to go IPO next year. which never exists in the UK. Kind of IPO hurdle, like the bar is way higher.
IPOs are much cheaper and have much lower requirements in Japan than they do in the US or in Europe in general, but in UK.
So, I mean, actually, that's really good.
Is that a good thing, though? Because a lot of Japanese IPOs are sort of like American Series Cs in terms of size.
Yeah.
But once a company IPOs, they've got a lot less flexibility. They've got to disclose a lot more. They've got shareholders who are trying to manage them quarter to quarter. So why is it a good thing that Japanese companies can IPO early?
I think like you made a nice point. So probably like after IPO, like some of the companies struggling to expand. But basically like in the UK, there's no like IPO bubble market. So basically they can't really go IPO in the UK. Less than $1 billion size company.
Okay. And so if someone needs to do a $10 million, $20 million round in the UK, in Japan, usually a company's going to IPO if they need to raise that kind of money.
Yep.
So in the UK, that money's just not available. Those companies just flounder.
But the biggest difference is we can raise 10 million, 20 million in the UK. But like, the question is, what's your exit strategy? Yeah. If seeing like an IPO is just too far away, the investor will ask you like it might be like M&A is your options. But there's no company in the UK who can pay like 100 million to acquire a company. And then if they want to be acquired by the American company, they better be in the US because there's no decision maker in London.
Is Japan better? I mean, there is the mother's IPO option, but so does Japan face that same problem without the IPO? There's simply no exit strategy for Japanese companies?
Yeah, so in Japan, it's like roughly a threshold is like 30 million. So less than 30 million, like we can, not like there's many buyers like who can pay 30 million. Yeah, above that range, basically like, going to the IPO. Which is like, which is great. Like, it's very low. And everybody can go to IPO. And the secondary, the entrepreneur can focus on business. To go to the IPO, it's like kind of two criteria basically. How much revenue we got and how much profit we got. Pretty much that's all. But like, to be acquired by like, Facebook, more importance is like, how many events you attending where like a Facebook digital maker is like around. And we can exchange like a card or like, we can have a chat with them. And I feel like it's just literally wasting time.
Huh. So the IPO is just a much more predictable, safe path. You can plan for it. Everyone knows what to expect on both the investor and the startup side.
Yeah. I never attend like any pitching meeting. I never meet anyone who doesn't bring any revenue or like actual connection to me.
Right.
But it's just wasting time.
So listen, do you want to throw something out that you would want to change about Japan?
The one thing is kind of liquidity of the people's movement.
You mean the people changing jobs?
Yeah, kind of like flexibility. Yeah. Especially like as age goes on, people like just reluctant to change the company basically. Obviously like the people's capability which required by the company is been changing all the time. Right. Then so the company want to like reform the team with keeping the flexibility. Like under the regulation of Japanese law, employee is well protected.
It's very hard to fire people in Japan.
Yeah, it's also like actually my intention is not like to fire people, but like we want to keep the nice tension between like a company and employee.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important cause and effect you have to keep in mind. So it's not just that it should be easy to fire people because you want to fire people. Nobody does.
Yeah.
But in Japan, because it is so hard to fire people, companies tend to think not, let's look at the market and see what we can build and what opportunities there are. They tend to look at their existing staff and say, okay, how can we use these people? What can we assign them to do? And that's inefficient for the companies. It's a bad use of employee talent.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And then like if employees are feeling like they need to catch up with the latest trend, like they can like learn by themselves as well. But like, many people right now, like we just try to be sticking to the companies until like, AI will destroy all the jobs, blah, blah, blah. So,
and hopefully they'll be retired by that point.
Yeah. That's whole annoying mentalities right now. But actually at the same time, like my company is hiring a lot like 60s, 70s from TEPCO or like KEPCO, like other energy huge companies. Their experience is very valuable. Like, let's say Toshiba engineers, like, many startups want to hire him.
This is something I think it is changing. I mean, it started changing with designers and engineers and people with specific skills in their 20s and early 30s. So suddenly it became okay for big companies to hire them. But most of the employees at big companies or mid-sized companies who are now in their 50s or 60-ish, most of them were trained at a time to be generalists.
Yeah.
So they were brought into a company and they were put in sales and they were put in engineering and maybe a little time in HR. And a lot of these people don't have skills that are valuable outside of that company.
Yeah, so generally speaking, it might be quite hard for the people's
But the ones that do, I think it's great you're hiring people who are in their 50s and 60s, these mid or late career. Is that common? Do you see more and more companies doing that in Japan?
No, they're actually trying to do that because many companies who are doing who challenging into the energy industry, who are doing healthcare industries, they need some very experienced people's help. But at the same time, as you said, I don't think this trend won't be applied to all the 40s, 50s, 60s. It's the only probably tiny chunk will be hired.
But I think even if it's only a tiny chunk, that's so valuable. Because if that job market exists and people can change flexibly, we might have, 20 years ago, a very talented 45-year-old engineer or salesman in a large Japanese company whose boss has just lost a big political fight. He knows his career is not going to go so well in that company now, but he has no other options. But once there's this job mobility, suddenly the most talented ones can say, okay, well, let me look around. Let's see who else can use my talents. And that's starting to happen?
Yeah. The average American entrepreneur age is somewhere around the 40, right?
Yeah.
So I think in Japan, was a bit younger, probably, say 35 or something. But now people getting older to be entrepreneur, or second entrepreneur, third entrepreneur. So yeah, I think that's a good thing to do.
Hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, Yohei, thanks so much for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for your time. Thank you. I will appreciate it.
And we're back. Yohei made a very interesting point about how very hard it is for companies to differentiate in a commodity market. Most of the energy advertising has focused on green energy or clean energy, but so far in Japan, customers simply want inexpensive, reliable energy. And that's how the markets have been shaking out all over the world. There are now over 400 companies in Japan's new deregulated retail energy markets. But startups have a hard time competing in the main markets of generation, transmission, and retailing. So far, almost all of the winners there have been the big, familiar names. But startups like Enechange are succeeding at the margins. They're succeeding not by trying to take business away from the large established players, but by creating entirely new business models in the niches opened up by these large regulatory shifts. Now, Yohei's points about the attractiveness of the Japanese startup markets and the ease at which companies can IPO is interesting. In the past, I've criticized Japanese startups for IPOing too early, and while they still have so much growth potential. That makes sense when you compare Japan to San Francisco, but when you compare it to the UK or European markets, things do look quite a bit different. Either way you look at it, though, Japan is a great place to start a startup. And with all the deregulation going on in energy and finance and other fields, I'll be bringing you a lot more stories from the founders who are disrupting Japan. If you've got a story about energy and competing in a deregulated market, Yohei and I would love to hear from you. So come by disruptingjapan.com/show111 and let us know what you think. When you come by this site, you'll see all the resources and links that Yohei and I talked about and much, much more in the resources section of the post. And hey, I know you've been meaning to do this for a while now, but when you get the chance, please do give us an honest review on iTunes. It's really the best way you can help us get the word out and to support the show. But most of all, thanks for listening. And thank you for letting people interested in Japanese startups know about the show. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for listening to Disrupting Japan.